Welcome to Eat, Sleep, Wine, Repeat, a podcast for all you wine lovers who, if you're like me, just cannot get enough of the good stuff. I'm Janina, your host, brand ambassador, wine educator, and sommelier. So stick with me as we dive deeper into this ever-evolving, wonderful world of wine. And wherever you are listening to this, cheers to you. Hello, wine friends. I'm so pleased to have you back on another episode. And today, I'm going to talk about rosé wine, which I think we all know is having a moment. Well, actually, it's not really even a moment. Global rosé sales have increased by around 17% over the last 25 years. And just all the data suggests that this is not a passing trend. France, of course, still leads the charge, no surprise there, but 80% of the world's rosé comes from just 4 countries: France, Spain, the US, and Italy. But let's be a little more niche. Let's talk about English rosé, because something quite exciting is happening here. English wine is growing rapidly, and not just in production, but in tourism. There is just so many more vineyards to visit than ever before. It's so hard to keep up. And of course, with rising temperatures, they are a serious and complex issue. But one of the undeniable shifts is that ripening grapes, and you heard it here first, taking your summer holidays around English vineyards. This is a reality now. Today's episode is so perfectly timed because this week is Great British Rosé Week. It's now in its 6th year, running from May the 4th to May the 10th. And this was set up by Archie Patel, who joins me today. Archie is a wine communicator, consultant with a real focus on English wine. She's also the founder of Dancing Duchess, her very own sparkling rosé. And through her platform, Wine Away the Day, she brings together wine travel and storytelling in a way that you will not be able to resist. And this year, I am working on the Great British Rosé Week campaign 2. So it felt only right that we dedicate an episode to it. So, of course, this episode, you're going to learn how rosé is made, what defines an English rosé style, and what grapes are being used. But we've also mixed things up a little bit. We are comparing 3 very different English sparkling rosé wines, including Archie's, and using them to explore key winemaking decisions. Along the way, I'm going to be building your sparkling wine vocabulary. So terms like vin clair, explaining assemblage, what does it mean by liqueur de tirage, and make sure you stay right to the end because Archie shares her personal recommendations for some wineries to visit and places to stay, whether you're planning a trip to England or just fancy a countryside escape a little closer to home. And on that note, I realised I almost never promote myself. So here we go. If you would like your own bespoke wine tasting, I'm very much here for that. In fact, why not make it a rosé-focused one? We can compare styles across winemaking techniques, grape varieties, regions, price points, or if you're visiting the UK and want a wine guide for a few days, I can help you with that too. Tastings are available both in person and virtually, so just drop me an email. All the details are in the show notes. Now, I hope you've got a glass of rosé poured. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode. In celebration of Great British Rosé Week, we have several rosés, sparkling in fact. So, to toast, woohoo! There we go. That's how we start an episode. But before we get ahead of ourselves and start talking about wines that we shall be drinking as we go along, you started Great British Rosé Week 6 years ago.
I know, I can't quite believe how long it's been, actually. And, when I first started it, I think it was just an initiative where I was like, I want to do something. We're still in the midst of lockdown. I wanted to do something to support the English wine industry and support local producers. And I'd spent so much time visiting vineyards, tasting English wine. That's basically all we did with our free time when we were in the middle of lockdown. And I thought, well, there's English Wine Week already there. I think English rosé is fantastic, particularly, I mean, still and sparkling, but I just thought some of the newer stills also that were coming out were just amazing. And wouldn't it be nice for people to get behind English wine and British wine in a slightly different way and just add in another hurrah in the calendar outside of English Wine Week? So I was like, I'm going to champion English rosé.
I mean, I'm all about celebrating anything. Like, just give me a reason, and I'm off. So obviously, I'm very happy to be joining you on this initiative this year. But have you seen? How do you think English rosé has grown over the last? I guess even decade, but the last 6 years for sure.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think it has been evolving so much. And, when you look at the stats and the data, not just for the, English and UK wine industry, but as a whole, rosé consumption has continued to increase and increase and increase. And I think in the UK and perhaps, the climate, global warming, hotter summers here, maybe it's helped it boom a little. But also, I just think that the image and the perception of rosé in general has changed. It's not something people just drink when it's warm. People are drinking it all year round. People are interested in stories and producers. They're not just drinking the first thing they see off the shelf or they go to. They're willing to be more adventurous and try new things. And I think all of that has added to the value of the kind of rosé scene here in the UK.
100%. I mean, I was looking at the stats. I was really, really interested. And back in 2000, we only had 875 hectares of vines planted, whereas now we have nearly 5,000 hectares under vines.
It's amazing.
So that is absolutely astonishing. And for anybody who wants to know, 25% of all of the still wines in England are actually rosé. So that's a pretty decent amount.
Market to be getting involved with.
Well, absolutely. And we will be starting by tasting your wine that you've made. And you're going to take us through all of the winemaking decisions that you've made there. But actually, sparkling, they don't say in the statistics how much is actually rosé. So, and it's funny that we have 3 sparkling rosés today. But I mean, okay, somebody who's listening globally, they're going to say, okay, but what's the English rosé style? Why would I drink English rosé over Provence, which we all know is, world class and famous and the place that you go to for rosé? Why go English? Give me your elevator pitch.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, first of all, because it's England, it's not Provence. Our soil, our land, our British weather, our cooler climate gives us a distinct style of rosé that is very different and unique. And obviously the grape varieties we use are also very different to Provence. I think you've got cooler climate, higher acidity, and that equals more freshness, and we've got the chalk limestone soils that give it the minerality, which I really love in wine in general. And so for me, that's why I love that quality that you get in the rosé here. And then obviously, again, with the grape varieties, actually Pinot Noir, a majority of rosés do use Pinot Noir. And actually, that's more akin to something like a Sancerre rosé, actually, rather than a Provence rosé. And the Pinot Noir fruit, the depth, the texture, its ability to evolve in bottle, the potential for that is actually amazing. And often, I think, is overlooked when people think about English rosé and what it is, but also just its potential in general. And then you have other grape varieties, things like Rondo and Dornfelder, which also make amazing reds. People have never heard about those grape varieties, but they're really good in rosé. They grow well here. They bring out really soft, ripe fruit characters in rosé, making them soft and supple. And I think that's great. People are also blending partners, things like Ortega, Solaris, Pinot Gris. You're seeing so much more of that. And that adds freshness, aromatics to the wine, floral aromas. And I think all of that is so important in adding the uniqueness of what English rosé is.
Do you know, ironically, it's almost like we're producing liquid that is the English rose.
It's true.
Right, actually. But no, it is. It's so worth pointing out as well. You said the cool climate, that obviously means that we're going to have high acidity in the wines. But it is such an asset for us that we have that longer growing season, which means you get to build up those phenolics like to their fullest. You're not rushing the fruit. And so all of that, I think, primary fruit flavors get to show so much more in our wines because they've had that slow growing season. And I just think it's absolutely beautiful. Hence why people are really getting behind and talking about these wines. And I do think they show a sense of place.
Yeah, absolutely.
However, we can also experiment. We can also do so many different styles. And I think we decided to taste through 3 different sparkling wines just to kind of see how they really stand up to one another. And what does that mean for English wine? I mean, okay, I'm going to pour myself just a little tipple of your...
A splash.
Just a splash of
splash,
Dancing Duchess Rosé.
Our first try.
Woohoo! This is a 2022 vintage. So I'm going to pour a little bit. Just as I'm pouring, I mean, what do you think is still misunderstood about rosé? And, let's break some rosé myths here, please.
Well, first of all, I think, like we already touched on, is that the myth, I think because Provence is such an icon in the rosé industry and it's seen as a gold standard, I think people kind of always want to kind of put that as a benchmark against either producing rosé or what all other rosés, even globally, are compared to. And I think that actually it's realizing that there are so many more broader, diverse categories and styles of rosé, and then that they're not all the same. They're not all pale, simple, easy drinking rosés. They can actually be super interesting. They can be dark. They can be salty or savory. They could be luscious. They could be off dry. There's so many different styles, and I think it's a little bit misunderstood. I think rosé historically was seen as just a simple, easy holiday wine and not really being paid attention to over the years. And now I think that is changing.
No, 100%. I think the one style, and I ask you this because, you've done a lot of work tasting English wine. I've not really tasted any rosé from England that's made in the Saignée method. I feel like I haven't come across any. There's got to be somebody. There's got to be people because everyone's experimenting. But is there any bigger, more well-known rosés, still wines on the market that are made in the Saignée method that you know of?
And we will fact check this, but I believe that Hambledon make one with the Saignée method. That is also Meunier.
Oh, interesting. And when we say also Meunier, that's because this wine that we're pouring, your sparkling wine, is 100% Meunier. So it's just interesting. Actually, we should just wind it back slightly for anybody who just wants to know how rosé is made. Of course, we have to use some sort of red grapes. There's very often white grapes in the blend, but there has to be some red grapes because the colour comes from the skins. All of the famous Provence and many of the pale rosés are direct press, so it's just a second to get that colour from the skins. But you can macerate to make a wine that's a little bit darker, a little bit more complex. But Saignée, as I said, is such an interesting one, often seen as like maybe not as good quality, a byproduct, but then at the same time, if it's good quality grapes and the winemaker is paying attention to how long the juice is in contact with the skins before they bleed, that's what Saignée means, before they take it away from the skins, actually you can get some really serious, very kind of concentrated, very food-friendly rosés. Hence why I was asking, actually, that's the only style I haven't actually come across personally for me in England yet.
It is beautiful. So the premier cuvée rosé from Hambledon is Saignée method. And it is really beautiful. And it's deep kind of copper, cherry kind of colour. And, well, it's just, yeah. It's beautiful. It's gastronomic. It's really rich, textured, full body. It's really, really beautiful roses. If you have the opportunity to try it or go and visit them and try it there, then yeah, I absolutely would. With the restaurant.
Well, have you eaten at the restaurant yet?
I had last year, actually. They put on a beautiful sparkling rosé wine flight for Great British Rosé Week, where you could try all 3, including the Saignée method wine, with lunch and in the tasting room. And we went for that, and it was beautiful.
Well, I know that they did a lot of investment. They did a lot of work making sure they got the right chef. It's still for me to go and visit, but how amazing now. I think, we'll everybody stay to the end so you can I will go through some suggestions of where to go, but definitely now so many wineries actually have opportunities to dine and fine dine, as well as obviously, nibble on some charcuterie and be very relaxed. It's fantastic. Okay, everyone listening is going, what about the wine in your glass, though? Shut up about the winemaking. No, Stop talking about how rosé is made and tell us about...
Is it good?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I can confirm it's good. But let's talk me through your sparkling rosé process from start to finish, and how you think that actually is different from the other English sparklings out there.
Well, again, and similarly to even Rosé Week in general, I think I knew very early on that I wanted to have my own stamp on the English wine industry, not just with Rosé Week, but also with a winemaking project. And very early on, I think it was 2020 really that I decided I wanted it to be Meunier. I had already tried I tried some sparkling, and there weren't any Meunier ones at that time. And I had tried some stills that were a single varietal Meunier still rosé. And there's something about it. I just instantly loved it. And the more I tried it, the more I loved it. And I thought, hang on a minute. Why is sparkling? What is happening with the sparkling rosé here? Why is there no Meunier-led sparkling rosés? And so not only from a consumer perspective, but from a wine lover, a wine professional perspective, I wanted to create something that was going to kind of blend those elements and also create a niche within the English wine industry and with sparkling rosé, to create something that was unique and something that no one had tried before. And I think, it was validated with an early private visit to Ashling Park in Hambledon, and we had a tour for about an hour, Ali and I, with Corinne Seeley, their winemaker, and she was also just a huge fan of Meunier. And I think we kind of looked at each other saying, yes, this is confirming what we already suspected, that Meunier is going to do very well here, and we just need to jump on that bandwagon. And so it wasn't just a kind of, out of thin air type of idea. I think we thought about it for a long time. And then actually we were going to start in 2021, but the weather, I don't know if you remember, it was a pretty awful summer, and we didn't want to just do it. We wanted to wait until we had a really good vintage. And so we waited, and then obviously 2022 was epic. So we thought, right, let's do it. Let's start this process. And then again, obviously, we are not vineyard owners. We live in South London. So how do we go about this? And so really it was kind of, we already knew we wanted it to be Meunier. We knew that we were going to have to source the grapes. But with that, we'd also need to work with a contract winemaker. And I'd already had quite a lot of contact with Define Wines at that point. I'd done a lot of kind of masterclasses and tastings with them. I was really interested in how they were working and doing, a lot of exciting things and really changing, the English wine industry from a contract winemaking point of view. And at the time, Nick Lane was the head winemaker, and he had, worked with Cloudy Bay, he had worked with Moet, he'd worked with Dom Perignon, and he had, come in with Henry and started this here. And I think I was just really kind of like, this is it. We must correct Defined Wines. Oh, we must. And again, and perhaps that's maybe, again, when you're not in the wine industry and you're not on vineyards all the time, from that sense, it was, kind of making a decision that we felt that we would be comfortable with, also with someone who was going to help us. We weren't just handing it over and let them do their thing. We wanted to be involved every step of the way. And, we wanted to be involved in all the decision making and, all of the technical aspect of things as well. So we didn't kind of just leave them to it and then they said, here's your wine. A few years later, we were involved with every aspect of it. And we decided, we went for a little tasting, but we had decided early on that we would probably leave it for up to a couple of years on lees to let it evolve and develop some more of those lees aging characters to, kind of give it a little bit more. We kind of want it's a balancing act really, but I think we also wanted it to be ready to drink and, fresh and fruit forward and people could enjoy instantly, but we still wanted to have enough body and texture and character that it would evolve with time and would develop a few of those kind of brioche kind of pastry flavors.
Okay, so let's talk about two things. Pinot Meunier in England and why you think it's so good and why you chose it for this wine rather than any of the other grapes. And then let's talk about lees aging in a second. So Meunier.
Well, actually, so Meunier, it can be fickle, but it actually ripens earlier in cooler climates. And so I think it is suited to British soil in general because of the way that it grows. But also, I think it can have this kind of savory profile to it that I think makes it quite gastronomic. And while it's traditionally seen as a blending party to add different characters and texture to the wine to offset the Pinot Noir and the Chardonnay. I think on its own, it can still give plenty of fresh, ripe fruit character, but then adds this extra dimension that I don't think that you quite get with Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And I think not everybody, the way Pinot Noir evolves, I'm not sure, it's not everybody, I love it, but I'm sure that maybe from a consumer point of view, it might not be everybody's cup of tea.
I think it bloody well should be. No, because it has this, this softness and this mid-palate generosity, and hence why I think it's always been there to, to round out the trio, and always been seen as kind of, it's reliable because Chardonnay and Pinot Noir are fussier. But on its own, it has such juiciness. It has these lovely, I get always something like rose petals or something beautifully floral, and this really bright cherry nature, really bright red fruits. And on its own, I just think if it's taken care of, I really do think it shines. So definitely we're paying more attention to it in England, aren't we?
Yeah, and absolutely. And, and I think, and perhaps from a general point of view, we don't see it much even Champagne, for example, but it is there and people are growing a lot more of it in Champagne as well. And whenever you try Pinot Meunier only Champagnes as well, I've always really loved them and enjoyed them. And so I think that kind of cultivate that love for the grape variety even outside of the English wine industry.
No, I think that's a valid point. I was always asking, why is it that we seem to be focused on Meunier more than Champagne? Is it because we're even cooler climate than Champagne? But actually, having spoken to some sommeliers and knowing about some growers in the Vallée de la Marne, which is the region where so much Meunier grows in Champagne, actually, it's the younger generation who I think are just not following the same rules that their parents did, and there is more experimentation obviously with the younger generations, what we have in England, complete freedom.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's more, I think logically, if you are free and you want to give it a go, people are just recognizing, certainly in Champagne and in England, that it just is a great variety to pay attention to. We just don't typically find much 100% Meunier Champagne because a lot of it is these little growers and it's not being brought to England and stuff. But it definitely, that grape variety, like, pay attention to. It's really interesting. So how did you source your grapes and where are they from? And is that really difficult to just decide I am going to get hold of some grapes?
I think initially, yes, it was. I think it takes a lot more thinking than you realize. And again, because people, there are lots of vineyards that will grow Chardonnay and Pinot Noir and they won't grow any Meunier. And so I think generally when you look at the percentages of what's grown in England, Meunier is lower down. And so sourcing it is more expensive. You do have to look around and shop around a bit. And I think all of the grapes were from Kent, but we sourced 3 different parcels from 3 different vineyards. But everything was from Kent and everything was, kind of within 10-15 miles of the winery.
And actually question, because I know, even I don't know this, say I was willing and determined to spend my evenings looking and sourcing grapes, would I go on an Amazon website style of people selling grapes? Like, where do you go to get grapes?
So actually the wine GB threads are really good for this. So people will sell and advertise. Not everybody wants to openly say that they are selling their grapes. And so it is under the radar thing, but there are grapes around, there are grapes to sell. People will say that they either want some or that they are selling some. And so there is a whole market that kind of goes around.
The black market. No.
Yes, the grape market.
The grape market.
Brokering.
It's fascinating. Yeah.
It is fascinating, yeah.
And actually, I'm sure that is probably a very similar model all over the world. Maybe, actually speaking to the regional bodies, the generic bodies of the region where you want to source grapes, they're probably a good start. And then it's just having a lot of conversations and getting to know behind the scenes. Okay, so you've got 3 different Pinot Meunier from 3 different sites. So effectively, you had your vin clair. So this is your base wine once you've gone through the first fermentation. So this is before blending. Now, you've got your assemblage, which is your Pinot Meunier together. And in terms of the wine then, after it's finished its second fermentation, how long does it stay on the lees?
So almost 2 years. So if being precise, just under 23 months.
Okay.
Shy of. And that was, again, we were kind of aiming for the 2-year mark, but we had to get in disgorging dates ahead of time. And, we were in a slot. And again, I think being a very small producer, working with a contract winemaker, that kind of stuff was tricky. But we went for a tasting, 6 to 8 weeks beforehand. And we went for a dosage trial to make sure, one, that we were happy, but also to determine, what we wanted the final style to be and to make those final decisions. So, but yes, almost 2 years.
Do you know, I found it really fascinating. I was looking up autolysis, which is the process of the dead yeast cells, so the lees as we like to call it, affecting the wine. And I always simply say to people, oh, time on lees gives you the brioche, toasty, biscuity aromas. And it does over time. But I had no idea that actually that's a much more like a secondary thing that comes like with like a slow chemical process. And actually the first process that comes with the dead yeast cells is actually, it's like releasing all of these compounds, and it's actually just affecting the structure and softening up the acidity and stabilizing the mousse and giving it that beautiful, fine, creamy texture that we know of. So that actually happens first, in like almost like the first year. And then so if you find a sparkling wine that's traditional method, but has not had more than a year, actually it tends not to build up that complexity.
No, and the minimum is 9 months, really.
In England,
but
yeah.
We knew that in England.
It's not enough.
We knew that wouldn't be enough. Yeah.
Yeah, because we want the brioche. Actually, okay, so I'm smelling and tasting the wine. I actually just think this is it's fresh, but it's also slightly floral. I get a little bit of rose. I get brightness of raspberry. And I just think it's a very, very pretty style, which is kind of what you were describing, right?
And actually what I love is that, and obviously now I've tasted it, I've tasted it over and over, but from a couple of months after bottle rest, after we disgorged, versus now, it's changed so much. And I do actually think that it's softened quite a lot, even just having had that extra 9 months in bottle now.
Well, and that's the other thing about, so this is my request to you. You make the wine. I want all sparkling winemakers on the back label to say, when was the wine disgorged? Because having the wine,
yes,
I know,
yeah.
From that geeky point of view, having the wine on the lees, it doesn't stop the wine from oxidating, but it really protects it. And it, again, because of all the compounds. And so it's a very, very slow release. So you kind of keep the wine very, very fresh. And then as soon as you do take the lees out of the bottle and you disgorge, and now it's under cork, the effects of oxygen are just so much more, and that's when it can get even more kind of toasty and dried fruit and honeyed and have a much more obvious oxidative effect. So I just always think it's fascinating if you could get your hands on the same bottle of wine, one that was disgorged a year or two earlier, perhaps.
Yes, yeah.
And then and know, okay, this one's been longer on the cork. How is this different to one that's recently been disgorged? I just always think that's just the geeky side of me. But interesting that you're saying. So are you preferring it now than when you first released it?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's just getting better and better. And I think kind of, obviously it's really interesting, or maybe it's just that I've tried it so much and maybe my viewpoint changes on every time I try it. I'm not sure. But I definitely think that little bit of bottle age now, it is really drinking very beautifully compared to when I was tasting it back in September.
Yeah, no, it's just, do you know what it is? I find this just a very juicy, fruity wine that has this lovely peachiness. And there is a chalkiness underlying. But I'm imagining that all your Meunier came from clay soils, did it not?
Yeah, well, I think so, because we weren't really going 10 to 15 miles outside of the kind of Canterbury area. I imagine it was all clay, yeah.
And actually, but Meunier, by the way, everyone listening, Meunier is apparently supposed to grow exceptionally well in clay soils. There you go, as opposed to chalk. Now, I just have to ask you one more question, and then actually what I want to do is compare to our second sparkling, which is also made in the traditional methods.
Which is terrifying.
But you talk about dosage and dosage trials. So for anybody listening, dosage is actually adding in a measured amount of wine. Could be some brandy in there as well for certain people. Could be reserve stock for certain people with a type of with sucrose. So it could be cane beet sugar, it could be concentrated rectified grape must. So, sugar and wine typically. That's what dosage is, not to be mixed up with residual sugar. Because this is actually something I realised. I was having a conversation with somebody.
That can be confusing.
Well, totally, because you think you're adding in the sugar, so therefore what you add in is what you're left with, the residual sugar per litre. No, so just actually, for me, the way you realise is that the sugar is going in with a liquid, so you're adding in and already changing the amount of total liquid volume just slightly, but also a sparkling wine is not always actually 0 grams of residual sugar per litre. There could be a little bit left after fermentation.
Yes, yeah.
So that's why the RS, the residual sugar that you will always see, you won't see what dosage, the amount of sugar that was added into the bottle. You will see the residual sugar, the RS at the end, because what is the amount of sugar that is left in that actual bottle? So I realise it's mixed up all the time. That is the first time I've ever specified. So in terms of now we have established dosage trials, have you gone from adding nothing all the way up to 12 grams, which is what is allowed within the brut category? Have you done every single gram to...
We did it in twos.
Okay.
So we did 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12.
Right. And what did you find? Because everyone I speak to is like, it is not linear. It's never linear in terms of it doesn't just get fruitier. It just changes. What did you see?
Yeah, it's super interesting because there were 4 of us and we all had them all laid out side by side and we basically just sat there for 15, 20 minutes in silence, not conferring, tasting our way through and not conferring. And you're right, it is really tricky. And I think obviously at a consumer level, and for a lot of people, even personally, I guess if day to day, if someone lined up 6, 7 and 8, for example, grams per litre, you might not necessarily be able to taste the difference. But when you do it that way, you can definitely tell the difference, obviously, between 0 and 12. But everything in between, you had to really taste very carefully to see how it was changing.
It is absolutely fascinating. Well, everyone, by the way, if you like the idea of some white peach and crunchy raspberries with a little like rose petal and orange blossom is coming out more and more actually for me.
That's really interesting.
That's what you're going to get with the Dancing Duchess. And everybody as well, you'll have to go to my Instagram because the bottle design is absolutely gorgeous. And I don't buy on label, but if you're confused and you don't know, I mean, this one tastes good and it's got a very pretty label.
Style and substance.
That is, it is absolutely beautiful. Gorgeous, gorgeous artwork. Now, we are going on to another traditional method sparkling. This is from Ambriel. This is their Huzzah Rosé. It's a multi-vintage. These guys are based in West Sussex. They're overlooking the South Downs. And interestingly, you've already mentioned chalk. Think we've already mentioned clay, but most people don't talk about green sands soils. So chalk, as many people know, is very free draining. It's the same soils as champagne. Keep in mind, over 100 million years ago, we were under the sea. So the chalk is these crushed shells, they're oyster shells, but green sand is the part that's underneath it. So it's the eroded chalk. And in their vineyard, they have this green sand rock that just reflects the sun and apparently can change the temperature up by 2 degrees. So this is a site that just gives real ripeness. So let's give it a try.
Look at the colour. It's amazing.
This is super, super pink, which everybody, just as you were saying with the rosé myths, dark pink rosé is not necessarily sweet. It doesn't mean anything other than it's had some skin contact, which actually this wine has. Let's have a little try. Okay. Structurally, this is completely different. Colour-wise, intensity of fruit, style. Yours is very, the florals are really coming up, this real freshness. This is very much, even a little bit more savoury.
Yeah. And the texture, the textural depth.
And there's like a sour, more kind of tart red cherries with like maybe a burnt orange note.
Oh, so it's the orange skin or like kind of grapefruit.
Grapefruits.
Or pomegranate in there. Yeah.
So for anybody wanting to know about this wine, what's really, really interesting, this is 100% Pinot Noir, so already different to yours, but this has spent 36 hours on the skins. So when we were talking about how rosé is made, the fact that this is spending so much time being able to take the phenolics, the color extraction, again, even the tannins are in the skins, hence the color, but also this is only free run juice.
Yeah.
And with free run juice, you get wine that's more linear and with tension, it's pure. It has a lower pH, so higher acidity. And then as the juice is pressed more, there's more extraction. You're breaking more the internal grape structure, and then the juice you get, it's going to fill more the mid palate, and there's more fruit density, more structure and phenolic grip. So it's not bad having the fractions that come later, the more extracted juice. It's just the purity and the higher acidity comes at the beginning. So stylistically, it's a choice, and certainly something that I know is very important. This vibrancy, there's like no malolactic fermentation happening on this wine. So Wendy really wants to make sure that acidity, that freshness, the English crunch is there.
What I would say here is that, I guess, in terms of polar opposites, everything is done on site by them. You know, it's single estate, single vineyard, detail driven to the minutiae. And, you know, Charles and Wendy, they're both so hands-on. And I loved a quote that I read on their website, and basically all their bottles, when they're sending them out, they say, please look after your bottle because it's its first time away from home. And I just thought that's just so lovely and just speaks volumes about them and their process and the care and attention. All the wine are like their babies.
Yeah, totally agree.
And so, yes, when you're saying about, 36-hour skin contact, using the free run juice, the lees aging, multi-vintage, all of this stuff, it's the character of the wine is a reflection of them and how they've treated the wine and the whole process and their ethos in making their wines.
Do you know what is amazing about, especially I've had Wendy on the podcast before, we're really talking about the regenerative viticulture that's happening on site. So I will link that in the show notes, everybody. But Wendy is just one of the characters in the English wine industry. If you want to know anything about English wine, talk to her, because she will just volunteer up her time. She's so passionate, but also so fun, not stuffy.
Yeah.
And she used to be a barrister and just threw it.
I know.
Yet when you talk to her, like their whole branding is all about puns. We're drinking the Huzzah Rosé, which again is actually interesting fun fact. So the reason they call it Huzzah is because, as we know in England, we say Huzzah because we're celebrating. But actually sabrage, so that's where you open up a bottle of sparkling wine, traditional method sparkling, with the saber, the special knife. But it was actually a technique that apparently started in the Napoleon era with the hussars. So very similar to huzzah. And they love a pun. They love things that sound the same. There's even the story behind why the wine is called Ambriel. But hey, everyone, listen, I'll let you go and investigate that yourself. But just look out for all of the puns. And just like you said about telling people to take care of the wine because it's the first time away from home, on every bottle as well, it says made with care, so drink the same way. I mean, it's just, it is beautiful. It is those little details, isn't it, as well? And so, yes, they're very much into long lees aging. This specific wine hasn't necessarily had as many years. It's like their classic cuvee, I think ages for about 8 years.
Yes. Yeah.
So that is quite normal at Ambriel. They have what's their saying? It's GBP might also be about Great British Pound, but actually in terms of their own winery, it stands for grapes, blending and patience, and the patience part is very much about that long lees aging. And we were talking about what the autolytic characters, how they come through, and the longer on the lees, the more likely you will have that development of brioche and toast. This doesn't have as much as some of the others because this is based on the 2022 vintage. So this is going to be about this is a 3-year minimum wine. But again, we're tasting this just before release, everybody.
I know. So exciting to be one of the first people to taste it. I mean,
I know.
Just in time for Great British Rosé Week.
And so what I'm getting on this in terms of the autolytic characters is more like a little sconiness. Like it's like a savoury breadiness rather than it being toasty or biscuity. So for me, actually, the power of the fruit is just really coming through here.
But it's so mouth-watering, isn't it? But yeah.
Bring on the...
I see what you mean about the sconiness of it.
Right, yeah. Sconiness with like a pomegranate jam. How's that as a summary?
Yes. Yes, I like that.
And yours is
I
like
a
a
lot.
fresh wildflower walk on a spring sunny day. Yeah.
Through a summer orchard.
Through a
is what
summer
I've said,
orchard.
actually.
Oh, have you? Oh, no. And I said spring. I got the wrong season.
No, just kidding.
But hey, listen, it's interesting. There's density and there's power in the Ambriel, and then there's a lightness and a little soft perfume on yours. So very, very
It's
different
interesting,
style.
actually, because when you compare them side by side, I almost, and I don't like to use, some people do, and some people don't like the terminology of using masculine and feminine wines. But it is quite interesting tasting them side by side, because the counterpart to Dancing Duchess, which is quite a pretty delicate, I'd say, feminine wine, and the Huzzah, obviously, the structure and the depth and the character of it might be its counterpart to maybe something a little bit more masculine. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. They're just so completely contrasting. For those of you that don't know about Ambriel, go down, as I said, talk to Wendy. She will welcome you with open arms. But they are this single site, like you mentioned. Regenerative viticulture. I talk about this all the time, but it's just so important. It's not about just making good wine. It's all about biodiversity. It's thinking about the future. It's thinking about soil health. And actually, they have solar panels that they make so much energy they give back to the grid. They have, oh my God, I think I heard Wendy was talking about the fact that they don't even use water to clean their tanks. Cleaning in a winery is obviously the absolute most important thing. But she has a UVC barrel sterilizing wand. And apparently, I mean, everyone asked Wendy to get it out. Apparently, it's like a Star Wars lightsaber. But she steams the tanks, and that's a way where you're not having to use chemicals and you're not having to use water. So it's being really, really smart inside the winery, but outside, again, they are constantly analysing the soils and doing worm counts, and it's all about actually how much fungi do they have. And actually, interesting fact, it's not 100%, but if you have a lot of bats in your vineyard, this is a huge indicator that things are going really well in terms of biodiversity, because the bat population really needs loads of insects to feed off of. And so the idea that you want this whole biodiversity and you want to bring in the insects, and I know that Wendy's really, really big on working with the Bumblebee Conservation Trust. So she's got all these like walks filled with thyme and all these special trees that's going to attract the bumblebees, which are at risk at the moment. And it's just incredible seeing what they're doing on site and of course they have the sheep. And they have the sheep in the winter to graze around and be beautiful fertilizers, beautiful lawnmowers, do what they do best and stuff. So yeah, no, they're fun. They make great wines. Make great wines of, as we've said, patience, but also what they're doing in terms of taking care of the land. Everybody, guilt-free drinking here. That's what I say. So yes. Okay. Do we want to open up the third wine, which is a Charmat method sparkling wine?
Goodness.
So a wine made in the tank. Oh, sorry. Let me do the same.
Careful now. Careful.
Ooh. Okay. So this is a Charmat method sparkling wine made by Silverhand. So Silverhand do traditional method as well, but they also do tank. And actually, I was talking to them. I only went to visit their winery just recently. And it's an interesting thing. A lot of people, sometimes they get confused. Like, hang on a minute, what's England's identity? What style are you doing? Well, we do them all. Get over it. But
I find that really funny, because people don't say that about like other countries that do it all. No one's saying Italy, why do you have Prosecco and French Quarter?
Well,
why can't they do?
I guess it's because we're new and people don't understand it, and they just want something simple to latch onto, I guess. And also, if you ask somebody about Italy and they say sparkling wine, they may actually not know about French Quarter, which, by the way, everyone, you should do. But back to England.
Should.
Yes. So this is Silverrain. So when you see Silverrain rather than Silverhand, I mean, it still says Silverhand, but when you see Silverrain as well, then you are going to know it is their Charmat method. But what's amazing about this producer is I always knew that they had the largest organic vineyard in England, but I didn't realise that literally the vineyard just keeps on extending, and you've got like walkways and paths and kind of roads in between the vineyards. It's just built up. It is 600 acres now of organic farmed vineyards. And of course, everyone, for organics, it does mean that you're not using chemical herbicides and insecticides. So, and in England, we have downy mildew and powdery mildew as the two major issues, and botrytis. So, fungus can be a real issue for us in a slightly more humid climate. So to make that decision is always a little bit tougher. And to have this 600 acres planted, and they have 900 acres, I learned, of their whole estate.
Yeah.
So half of it is planted to vines, and then the rest, of course, is all about hedges and trees, and then the biodiversity, of course. And they are, which I didn't realize until I went there, the first, and I think only, unless somebody else has just joined them, the only carbon negative winery. So actually,
oh yes, it's that. Yeah,
they are very large. A lot of people say, who's the biggest winery these days, and Chapel Down has always been the biggest. But it seems from the amount that they're able to produce, and they are around that 1 million bottle mark now. That either way, they are one of the largest. But incredible that they are able to do the tank method, which is a much more affordable sparkling, as well as having traditional method. And the idea they were saying about having Charmat, the tank method, is that they want you to drink English, drink local, drink sustainable. And at the end of the day, the most important thing, traditional method takes a lot longer. It costs more money. This is a faster process. It doesn't mean that it's not good quality, but it means that actually it can be sold at a lower price point, getting people to drink it. And actually, I'm really, really behind that massively, that concept.
But also not just that. Charmat, and you have to understand, there is nothing to hide behind Charmat. Charmat is about preserving that fresh fruit character of the expressing purely, without any other interventions, the land, the terroir. You still need grapefruit to produce great Charmat, because it's the fruit that's speaking. It needs careful handling. You need it. The quality does still need to be there, and that has to be reflected in the wine still.
Yeah. No, I think that's such a valid point. For everybody wondering again, if anyone's saying, what is Charmat method? Instead of having a second fermentation in bottle, the second fermentation happens in a sealed stainless steel tank called an autoclave. Interesting fun fact I found out about this wine. So most tank method sparklings have slightly less pressure, slightly less bubbles. So traditional method, probably yours maybe in Ambriel's, is between 5 and 6 bars of pressure, the same amount as a double-decker bus tyre. But Prosecco and other Charmat tank method sparklings typically will be around maybe 4 bars of pressure. They make this specifically, so when they add in their sugar solution with their yeast as well, they will make sure that they measure that appropriately. So actually, it's going to go up to the 6 bars of pressure, which I found that was actually quite interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah, and also for anybody who wants to know what that is, that's called because we're doing a lexicon as well today of sparkling wine terms. If you hadn't noticed, everybody, that's the liqueur de tirage. So putting in that sugar and yeast and also yeast nutrients and clarifying aids will be added in to start that second fermentation. So 6 bars of pressure. This is 100% Pinot Noir, and the colour, they've gone quite deep as well.
Yeah,
it's coppery. If we compare it to Ambriel's is really pink. It's really vibrant, whereas this is kind of the same shade in depth, but also a bit more coppery pink, isn't it?
Yeah. It's still a lovely colour.
And this is a serious tank method. I mean, I get a lot of wild red fruit. I get actually rose hips and bramble.
Yeah, you do. I do get that kind of hedgerow bramble, a little bit of kind of herbs.
It's
you do get
this is really herby.
Yeah, like maybe sage.
And then you get this like tart red apple on the palate as well, maybe a little bit of rhubarb, but really herby and wild. And of course, at this price point, it's about £18 or £19 a bottle. So as an introduction to English wine, you're not going to have any of the toastiness, the brioche, because there is no lees aging. Although, interestingly, they also do a white silver rain. So this is a white sparkling made in the tank method, or Charmat method. And actually, before they bottle, they do actually leave the wine in contact with the lees, which is at the bottom of the tank, for a little, so it will then give a little bit of creaminess. So it will affect the texture slightly rather than actually adding in any of the flavours. So they do that with the white, but this pink, they want it to be all about the crunch, all about the freshness, which I think they're doing really, really well.
Yeah. And is this vintage Charmat? Or
no.
Non-vintage Charmat?
No, this is non-vintage.
Vintage, yeah.
But they've only been doing this since 2024. So kind of around this time, May time, 2024.
Yeah.
So this has only existed for a few years. Yeah.
Okay.
And actually, it's worth noting, Silverhand, this year, their winemaker Theo, for their traditional method Blanc de Blanc, 2018, he was featured in the drinks business, the top 100 master winemakers this year.
Oh,
so that's nice.
Really impressive.
Getting an English winemaker in there. So they're
in the list.
Yeah, I was quite impressed. They've got a cellar door to go and visit. It's definitely because there's so much about organics and conservation. So actually, they've got a whole team. It's either 6 or 7 full-time members all year round going out. They've built these like little towers. And they're these special towers using the bricks and the stones of the land. They're using flint. They look really beautiful, and they are. I don't know. I called them. I did ask them what the name was, and then I've forgotten. But basically, they're like insect towers, but for all animals. So because they're built with stones and flint and stuff, at the top there's gaps to bring in the barn owls. Then there's other gaps for different birds, and then there's gaps at the bottom for the insects. And they've got them I think there's about 7 of them that they've built across the estate, and that's something really quite impressive to see and quite beautiful when you're standing out in the vineyard. But when you are there, you're like, and you've got all these rolling hills, you just everywhere you look is just their vineyards with different aspects and different grapes and stuff. So they're experimenting. It's super interesting. Here's some fun facts, everyone, that I learned from my trip. This is why everybody get down to wineries, because you get to find out gossip and information that just isn't online. And they have the largest tank in the UK at 65,000 litres, which is huge. So getting to actually see that compared to, I mean, it's not as huge as industrial wineries, which sometimes I can't even, and you climb up ladders that go on forever into the sky before you get to the top. No, but for the UK, this is huge. And they have the longest bottling line in the UK, fun fact, at, do you want to guess how many metres?
75?
I told you, didn't I? I told you this before we started recording. No?
Did you?
Oh
no.
Did I not?
What is it?
There's 75.
No.
No, there's no.
Oh, is it?
There is no.
I didn't know.
What? Everybody.
I was like, it's going to be ridiculous.
Give this girl a medal. She's psychic. 75 metres. Yeah.
Wow.
So
that's impressive.
I know. So in terms of a winery, really nice to go there. They've got a cute little kind of cellar door, and they're building a restaurant which should be ready in the summer of this year, 2026. It's called,
that's exciting.
Yes, we must go. Called The Lion. And because they have their own sheep, of course, they have sheep, and they also have long horn cows. There's going to be a lot of local produce. That's going to be, again, making things very, very sustainable. So once that's up and running, currently right now, if anyone who goes there, they have some of the best pizzas. They have this pop-up pub. So you can still go and eat and have an amazing lunch, but it's going to be super fancy or super tasty and sustainable shortly. But it's not a big cellar door area. It's much more about like the vineyards and everything out there and go out and explore.
There.
But you can go on a Land Rover and they can take you out, and it's all bumpy and dusty, and you get to feel like you're out on the land. So they've got it's a different experience. That's why you need to get down to different wineries, because they all have something unique about them. So that's fantastic as well. Oh, I've quite enjoyed tasting that, and actually interesting.
I know.
Yeah, how many grams of residual sugar does yours have?
6.
Yeah, and I think Ambriel's was 8.
Ambriel's 8.
Yeah, and funny enough, we've done it in the right order. because this is 10. But
10,
then that obviously
yes.
encourages a slight fruitiness. But yes, all within the brut category, so all up to 12.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I would also point out to people to not stress out too much about the actual residual sugar, because it also depends on the acidity of the grapes, the winemaking style, because actually if the fruit was super ripe from a year, you'll have what is perceived as real fruitiness anyway, and you might not need as much sugar added in at the end. So yes, but still. Anyway, all three are brut. Now, shall we finish off with you telling me, seeing as you have stayed in so many winery cabins and, I don't know, and hotels and whatnots, but you've also visited so many English wineries. So where should people go to experience English rosé this summer?
We're so lucky that there are just so many places for us to visit. So I guess if I break it down, the all-encompassing visit, and that's kind of the views, you can stay there, and they have a restaurant, and there's things to do in the surrounding area. I really loved Ashling Park, and I think they have these amazing little lodges, overlooking the vineyard, which is just beautiful in the summer. And they have a restaurant and a terrace. They even have a gin distillery, but you can hire bikes. You're not that far from the coast. I think it gives you a really lovely kind of the whole weekend experience of drinking rosé. They've got a beautiful terrace overlooking it all. And they make a still Meunier rosé, which I really love. And so I would definitely recommend that people visit there.
And they are in Sussex.
They're in Sussex. They're close to the Hampshire border, but yes, they're in Sussex. And then from more polished fine dining affair, I'd say go and spend a day at Hambledon.
Yeah, we touched on that. Mm-hmm.
They only produce sparkling wines, but they produce 3 sparkling rosés, all in a different style, and they are really beautiful. And the food at the restaurant is just gorgeous. So definitely go and visit Hambledon for the day. And then, because I love Cornwall and I spend so much time there, and I go once a year, I would say go and visit a little vineyard called Nightor Vineyard in Cornwall. And they do pop-ups and supper clubs and dine in the vines throughout the summer. And they're in North Cornwall, so they're very close to places like Rock and Padstow and Polzeath, with beautiful coastlines. And then down in the south as well, near Foy and places like that. So they're really well located. But yeah, and just make beautiful, beautiful still and sparkling rosé.
Perfect. Well, cheers. Cheers to you, your delicious wines, to Ambriel, who is in West Sussex, and to Silverhand, who are in Kent. So I will leave all of their information in the show notes because they are all fabulous. Everything you've mentioned and the wines we've tasted. Cheers.
Thank you so much. It was so much fun.
Well, happy Great British Rosé Week.
Yes, happy Rosé Week.
Yay!
Yay!
I do hope that a visit to an English winery is somewhere on your horizon this year. And I'm very excited to say there's also a new tool to help you do exactly that. The UK Vineyard Guide app has just launched. And it's this brilliant way to explore vineyards across the country. It has them all listed. You can plan your own route, create itineraries. But of course, if you do not want to use an app, I am always here. If you've got any thoughts or questions, you'll find my email in the show notes, along with the links to the wines we tasted today and the wineries that we mentioned. Now, next week, we're going a little deeper, back to my deep dive episode series, perfect for anyone studying their WSET diploma or just wanting to get properly geeky with wine. And we will be heading to Bordeaux. And to finish today's episode with a lovely wine quote, "Rosé is not a season, it is a state of mind." And if your state of mind is saying you are getting value out of these episodes, you are enjoying the show, do leave a review on Apple Podcasts or a rating on Spotify or wherever you are listening. And if you know a fellow wine lover, share the episode with them. It genuinely makes a huge difference to keep the podcast going. I hope this week brings you something bright, curious, and a little bit delicious. Until next week, wine friends. Cheers to you.